And what I really want to communicate to kids is this: when your world is out of control, mine's not.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm so glad you're here. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I'm passionate about helping you reclaim your story so you can build your most beautiful future. Now, today I am excited to have someone on the show who is helping parents all over the world on their parenting journey. Kirk Martin, the founder of CelebrateCalm.com, inspiring speaker and host of Calm Parenting Podcast, has shown almost 1 million parents how to stop the yelling, defiance, and power struggles with the most strong-willed children. Kirk is here today to help share his practical strategies and scripts delivered with humor and compassion. What an honor to have you on the show, Kirk. Thank you so much for being here.
Dr. Shafer, I am so psyched. I couldn't wait. Like, I didn't even sleep that well last night. Like, I was waiting for this morning because I love what you do. So I'm honored.
Thank you so much. And the feeling is mutual. I have so enjoyed listening to episodes of your podcast and your shorts on Instagram. They are so inspiring and helpful. And I want to start off with our audience to inform them, let them know what inspired you to create this space of CelebrateCalm.com and your podcast.
It was our strong-willed son, Dr. Shafer. You know these kids, like our son. So real briefly, I'm the son of a former career military dad, right? So my where the highway approach, fear and intimidation. So you grow up, you have kids, and out of the womb came this strong-willed son. We said he came out of the womb with boxing gloves on, right? Just like, the strong-willed kids, they like love to argue, they value their independence, consequences don't work. And you can't use fear and intimidation because they're tougher than we are. And so I tried my dad's approach. It didn't work. And it started to ruin my relationship with our son until I finally really learned the only person in life that I can control is myself. And when I began to control my own behavior, his behavior changed. And that's why I'm thankful for the strong-willed kids. They're like the best therapists ever because they will push buttons you didn't know you had, and they get to live with you 24/7 to do that all day long until you finally realize you're not really raising them. In a sense, you're kind of growing up as you're raising these kids. And so that kind of set us down this path, and we decided to invite strong-willed kids on the spectrum into our home. So the idea was, one-on-one therapy can be fine, but for many of these kids, they didn't really need therapy. They just needed some tools. And so we'd have 8, 10, 15 strong-willed kids in our house. We would change plans on them at the last moment because our kids can't deal with those transitions. We'd make sure they were frustrated so they'd melt down, so that in the moment we could teach them, hey, totally get why you're frustrated right now. And we could teach them impulse control, emotional self-control. And they didn't know we were working on that. They just thought they were coming to Lego camp because they would just build with Legos all day and fight with each other, and we'd teach them life skills. And we did that for a decade. We had about 1,500 kids in our home, and then started speaking, and then podcasting. So
Wow. Well, I'm so glad that you took that inspiration and built upon it, because voices like yours are so important. People who are willing to learn these lessons and then try to disseminate them so that we can all learn from them. So I so appreciate you making that effort, because it is so incredibly impactful. And so many people have learned from your experiences now through Instagram and through your podcast. I want to highlight something that you have talked about on your platform, which is you mentioned meltdowns and the opportunities for growth that you were creating for these children that were in your home, that really had these challenges previously and really needed to learn those tools. Can you delineate for us what you have defined as the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum, and the different opportunities that we have as parents or caregivers or teachers to help children navigate those instances?
awesome. So to me, a tantrum tends to be a little bit more rational, right? Like, Mommy, I want the fruit snacks. And mom's like, no, you can't because we're about to eat dinner. Wah, wah. And then they're going to throw themselves on the floor. And if you have a strong-willed child, it's going to be an awesome production. And so this is not a dysregulated child. This is just a child who wants something just like I do and they can't get it. So look, it's smart of them. I don't think it's a negative. I think it's a very normal thing. So when parents are like, how can you get my kids to stop having a tantrum? Like, well, you need to stop needing them to stop, right? Like
Mm,
tantrum's normal. So the opportunity to me in with a tantrum is to demonstrate my own personal integrity and to demonstrate this. So when the parents don't have to like how I did this, but I love it. So we had all these kids and they would throw tantrums over. There's this little girl named Morgan and she loved cranberry juice. And she'd be like, Mr. Kirk, my daddy never says no to me because I have these beautiful green eyes. And I was like, your eyes are beautiful, but I'm not your dad. And I can say no. So she'd have these tantrums. And so what I would do is I would actually sit right in the midst of the tantrum. I would sit and I just observe. And then I'd let them know, look, I'm great with your tantrums. You can throw tantrums all day long. I just have two rules in my home for tantrums. Number one is that when we do something in our home, we do it with excellence. So if you're going to have a tantrum, I want it done really well. And the second rule is your tantrums just don't work with me. And so I like these phrases. Your mood does not determine my mood. Your behavior does not determine or change my behavior. Now that's hard, moms and dads, because their moods do change your mood. But as long as their moods and behavior are dictating how you react, then they're in complete control of you. So with a tantrum, it's an opportunity to teach them, hey, you're in complete control of this. You have a choice, but all I want you to know is your tantrums will never work with me. But if you want to problem solve with me, oh man, I'm all over that. So I'll wrap that part up with there's my energy doesn't go to reacting. Would you please stop? Because they're going to throw tantrums in the grocery store and in public because they're smart and they know you're going to be like, fine, just go grab a snack, just shut up. Right. And I don't, and I really encourage you practice sitting in that until they learn
mm.
that simply doesn't work. So does that make sense for tantrums?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So for meltdowns, what's different to me is they tend to be irrational to me. And there's something deeper going on. Like a very common one with the kids we work with is anxiety. Um, Things are out of their control. Unknowns are really hard. So asking a strong-willed child to go to a new place, often you'll get, no, I'm not going. Taekwondo's stupid. You're stupid. And so your challenge as a parent is one, not to take it personally and instead, I want to lead them to a calm place. So if you don't mind, do you mind if I give you an example and then kind
No,
of break down the
please.
steps? Okay.
Yeah,
I feel
absolutely.
like I'm talking too much. And Dr. Shafer, I love listening to you. So I know I'm on your podcast, but I kind of want to interview you because you have so much wisdom. So, so in that moment, I'll give you the brief one. So I walk into the kitchen. My son is yelling at my wife. Well, I'm a guy, so I would normally come in. You know what? How many times have I told you you don't yell at your mother? You can't talk to her like that. If you keep it up, young man, you're going to lose everything you own, right? All those
Mhm.
typical things. And we had a very strong willed son. One time when I told Casey, you can't talk to me like that, his reply was, just did, right? And it's a miracle I am not in jail. And so, so in that moment, so I'll give you the steps and I'll put this together. When kids are really upset, our first impulse is usually we need to calm them down. But how
Mm.
many people like being told, hey, you know what, Dr. Shafer, you just need to calm down. And inside
Right.
you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna swear at you in Czech, in right in the Czech language, since I assume you know that. Um, it doesn't work. So it's counterintuitive. But when kids are really upset, it's because it usually feels like things are out of their control. The first thing I usually like to do is actually give the child something they are in control of. Because Once they feel some mastery over something, I'll give you a quick example of, oh, so child's melting down. Oh, I just remembered on Saturday we're going fishing. Could you go out to the garage and organize the fishing lures? Well, organizing something is tactile and it gives them something they're in control of. They tend to
Mm.
calm down more quickly. I like to validate with intensity. Quick example. Many of us have kids. Say you've got a child who comes home after school and they want to build a paper airplane and they fly it. It doesn't fly the right way. So they start in on it. Stupid airplane. I can't do anything right. And they crumple it up. And all good moms and dads nowadays come in. Oh, buddy, that was a really good airplane. And your child's like, duh. If it were a good airplane, it would have flown right. And so I'd rather come in and say, you know what? If I were you, I'd be frustrated too. See that intense validation rather than it's okay, because that's what husbands do to their
Mm.
wives. Oh, honey, it's okay. Please don't be upset. You're just overreacting, right? Like, because we're so uncomfortable with people's emotions. And I'd rather say, yeah, of course. You know what? You've been picturing that airplane all day at school because I know you weren't paying attention in class because it's boring to you. So you were picturing making this and you put a lot of effort into it and it didn't fly right, that's frustrating. See, that makes a child feel like, oh, you get it. You understand my intensity. And these strong willed kids, they picture things in their brains and they're like old souls. So they want to do adult type things, but they don't have the skills yet. So, moms and dads, don't be afraid of their intensity and the fact that they're hardcore. Look, I'm 59 almost, a couple weeks. I'm intense. When things don't go my way, I don't say, oh gosh, that's too bad. I guess this is an opportunity for personal growth. No, my first response is some F words or something. It's how I process my intensity. So
Mm.
when I come in the room, I'd be frustrated too. Then I give some space. Hey, I need to go get a drink. I'm going to go to the bathroom. Hey, when we get back, let's problem solve a different way to do this. And you'll notice the tone of voice, really important, even matter of fact tone. I am not a big fan of the modern day, really sweet tone that we try
Mm.
to use with our kids because it sounds condescending. And even with a 4-year old, they're like, why are you talking to me like I'm an infant? Like I'm 4 going on
Mhm.
34. Talk to me like
Mhm.
an adult. I feel like I'm talking a lot, Dr. Shafer. Sorry.
No, I love it. I'm soaking it in, Kirk. I'm soaking it in. I'm just loving this example that you gave. And there's so many things. It's difficult to unpack it systematically because I visualize so much and why it's so effective with parents that are just, sometimes it feels like you're standing on the edge of a tornado and figuring out how do I grab hold of this intangible thing and affect change. And one of the foundational elements that you discuss is staying calm and not adding into the tornado. But many parents are coming from family systems where certain things were modeled that were maladaptive, that didn't help to diffuse the bomb, so to speak, of the explosive child's experience. And so they don't have those tools themselves to give those to the children. And I really love how through the systems that you provide to parents, you're starting with, okay, so if our child is having a meltdown, not a tantrum, but a meltdown, we can help redirect their attention and their energy to something that will allow them to come back to a state of regulation from dysregulation. And then we can have the conversations, right? We can't when they're dysregulated. So if they like Legos, they're going to go play with Legos. If they like to organize the toolbox, which many young kids, that sounds amazing. That's what they're going to do. And that allows not only for the child to have that regulation, but I think that's an important element for helping retrain the parent's response because they don't necessarily have that tool either. That behavior wasn't modeled to them. That gives them something external. They get a positive data point. Oh, that worked with my child. That helped them calm down. And that gets them into a state of regulation again, and they can start problem solving with their child. Because as you've alluded to and discussed, in that moment, there's often not one dysregulated human being, there are two,
Right.
because there's this power struggle that's going on and this discomfort with big emotions. And so you have two dysregulated people, and we all know that nothing positive can come out of that. So once we can work on having strategies to help the child just when we're starting, then we can take an opportunity to work on retraining our relationship to our emotions and making sure that we are strengthening our boundaries and staying centered in who we are and how we want to show up in this moment.
Yeah, I love that. And I think so I'll finish that with I come into the room, Casey's yelling at my wife. And so I can come in instead of yelling at him, like you say, escalating.
Mm,
Instead, I say, hey, tell you're frustrated. Listen, I'm going to go outside. I had to hold up a football. I like nonverbals. Hey, when you're ready, if you want to come outside, we'll play catch. Hey, I'm going to go dump the Legos out on the living room floor. When you're ready, if you want to come, we'll build that spaceship. Sometimes you can't go outside. You've got 3 kids, so you can say, oh, you know what? I could really use your help. Could you go to the pantry, grab the spaghetti sauce? Do you think you could get that top off for me? I'm giving them something they're in control of. And one of our phrases is motion changes emotion. I don't like going toe to toe with an upset child because you're just going to feed off of each other's body language. So when I came in the room and said, hey, here are some options, and that phrase, when you're ready, with a strong willed child is super important, because if you say, you need to do this right now, young man or young lady, the strong-willed child will resist 100% of the time if you demand things of them. And I
mm,
know you know this. So when I say when you're ready, it's like I gave them ownership, some measure of control in this situation. Hey, I'm going here and I'm leading them. See, rather than like go to your room, which is fine, but in the end, when I'm always sending them to their room, what I'm communicating is, I can't handle you. Go away from me. And moms and
mm,
dads, don't feel guilty. If you need to do that as a first step, perfectly fine. But what I ultimately want to do is for my son or daughter to come in the room. And now we're sitting on the floor building with Legos. We're playing catch. There's no intense eye contact. I personally don't like eye contact with kids when they're upset, because when they're upset, they're usually embarrassed or ashamed of their behavior, right? Like kids know what they already did was wrong, right? They're not going to be like, yeah, I yelled at mom and called her the B word because she deserved it. Like they don't really believe that. They know that it was wrong. And then we're like, we need to talk about your attitude. So
mm,
instead, I lead them to me. And now when we're playing catch, when we're going for a walk, a drive, older kids, I used to, with our son, I used to say, hey, I'm hungry. Let's go grab a couple tacos. He was always hungry. And now you're driving in the car and you're both together. And what I really want to communicate to kids is this: when your world is out of control, mine's not. I've seen it
mm,
before. I did way worse before, right? When I was a kid, like I can handle this, because that sets you up for, as they get older, like the teen years are nothing but drama. And so if every time they come into the room with drama, you're like, oh, how many times do I have to tell you? You know what? If you're filled with drama, they're not coming to you. And I can tell you long term, like our son is 31 now, he still will say, hey, dad, I need to talk to you about something. And it's so awesome, even as a grown man, like that feeling of he's coming to his dad. If I hadn't have changed, he would have never come to me. And so anyway, moms and dads, it's hard, but once you start doing it, it's so much easier to invite them to do an activity than it is to stand there and yell, especially as a guy, because now I'm yelling and I'm looking at my wife out of the corner of my eye and I'm like, I don't think I'm handling this right. And so to feel like you have mastery of yourself is you're modeling. And I'll add one more thing, which is this: don't be afraid to change in front of your kids. Because
mm,
parents are always like, well, I've been yelling at them since they're 8 now or 10. I'm like, it's not too late. Your kids will literally get to watch you wrestle with your own childhood issues in front of them. If you ask our son what he remembers about his childhood, he will say, all I know about my dad is he was a freak. He yelled, screamed, was out of control. And then I watched him struggle to become a different person. Like, it's more important than anything they learn in school. So don't give up. You haven't ruined your kids. Just start making small changes.
I love that. And practicing leaning into connection in those moments rather than correction, which may have been strongly modeled for us. And I think was just a very typical parenting tool when we were raised and for generations before to correct. I think you said something to the effect of, why are you doing it this way? You know better. And the thing is, we tend to perform the best we can in that moment. And that goes for all of us, and accepting that and not trying to control where your kid is at, but meet them where they are, connect with them, validate them, as you said, is a much better place to then work towards them being open to what you are bringing to the table rather than being shut off in their own little world of, I'm not understood. And if I feel not understood, I'm just going to remove myself because it's dangerous to interact with these people that make me feel unseen and unheard. So I think that is absolutely critical. And I want to, before we move on from the meltdowns, I love visual cues. I love how you mentioned how you like to use visual cues rather than just focusing on language because their frontal lobes may be offline. They may not be able to interpret the language that you're speaking, but if you just hold up a football and that football has positive connotations in their minds, then that might be a step towards regulation, right? Oh, I've got this. When you're ready, I'm here. And by the way, the last time we played football, we had a great connection, right? So in their mind, they're thinking, okay, he's inviting me to connect with him. He's giving me permission to move on from
Mm,
this place in a safe way. And he's showing me that he still loves me and he's ready to receive me in all forms of who I am, because I'm not just a calm, loving kid. I'm also a kid who has meltdowns and gets frustrated and gets angry. And that's okay. But he's also extending this olive branch, this road out that maybe at my stage of development, I haven't mastered that yet. And
that's
it
so
goes
good.
back to something that you said about a fire, right? So we can either give them a road out from the fire, or we can see the fire and add to it with our reaction.
I love what that thing of giving them an out, right? And even not even using words, like sitting down, try this sometime. It's so cool. Everybody's kind of emotional. There's chaos in a room. One, I'd encourage you this week, just try it a couple times. Walk into a room, purposefully don't try to fix the situation or your child, which is hard because we all have control issues, right? And we want to like control it and fix it.
Yeah.
I walk in and sit, color. Coloring works with 4-year-olds and 14-year-olds. It is impossible to sit at the kitchen table and color and yell at people. And so you're right, nobody's ever yelled like, I'm really angry at you. You are drawing them to you, and you don't even have to say a word. And you can just slide over a piece of paper and some crayons, and now you're both doing it. I did a lot of that. I did a lot of uh, building with Legos is a really good one because it's something you're in control of. You're sitting on the floor. And then with some kids we worked with and our son, it was more football. It was very physical. A lot of times I would just hit the floor and start doing push-ups. I used to do that in the middle of the
Mm.
grocery store, and the kids would be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, when I get frustrated, I do my push-ups. You want to do 10 with me? Because if you did 10 push-ups every time you got upset, you would be jacked. I didn't say that part, but you can think it, right? Because your kids get upset all the time. I, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. And I'll give you this one for moms and dads. Think about this. When you're out in public and someone else's kid is melting down, You know exactly how to calm that child. In the grocery store, what do? Hey, could you help me reach that can of soup? And as soon as you give that other person's child a job to do, the tears stop and they go and grab the soup, and you're like, you are so helpful. Do you think you could reach something else? And it literally changed the whole situation, and you didn't have to correct them. It's just with our own kids, we're like, how many times do I have to tell you we're in the middle of a grocery store? You cannot do it. So go through a day sometime and imagine that your child is someone else's kid, and you'll
Mm.
probably relate a lot better to them. It's just kind of a neat little trick.
Yeah, and remembering in those moments, okay, who's triggered here? Are we
Yeah,
both triggered?
usually me.
Yeah. Are we both triggered and why? And it's really important, and you've spoken about this many times about making sure that you do the self-healing and identification of your triggers and dealing with those, learning your boundaries. Now, one step again, because when we are doing that, we need to deal with what we are bringing to the table. Sometimes in order to set us up for success, on that journey, it's helpful to have other things that give us positive data, things that we can change that aren't personal, that aren't tied to our past, that aren't tied to our emotions, that we can find success with and then encourage us to do the deeper, more challenging, often work to heal and more deeply connect with our children or the people that we're caring for. Now, one of the things that you talk about that I think is a great opportunity for doing so is to learn what reasonable, age appropriate, or developmentally appropriate expectations for a child can be, and how you can expect, not 100% of the time, but how you could anticipate they could respond in any given environment or to particular challenges. Could you speak on how you help parents have a better handle on what they can expect so that it just decreases the tension and causes less friction because we're not showing up expecting our children to behave essentially like someone with a fully formed frontal lobe, which we know is happening in our late 20s.
Right. I think it's so important even to change the expectations of yourself, right? Like
Mm,
I start with like it's hard, right? Like you're just learning how to be a parent. You've never done this before. You're figuring it out. And our kids are, and especially with strong-willed kids, a lot of us grew up in that era of um, kids are supposed to obey right away, right? There's
mm,
an old phrase of obey, what was it? Obey right away, all the way with a happy heart, right? And I hate that because it's just one, it's just stupid. It's not human nature. And so I like relieving parents of the guilt of like, oh, well, my child, I got a call from the preschool. My child's not sitting still. And I'm like, of course they're not, because they're four. Like they're not supposed to. So I'll kind of run through age groups. I was working, Dr. Shafer, I was working with his dad, and he's like, well, when is my toddler going to learn some self discipline? And I'm like, your child's like four. I said, so here's your job. I want you to write a job description for a toddler. And so what he came back with was a toddler's job is to be curious and explore and make messes and probably not hear anything I say. And I'm like, exactly. That's their job description, is to do that. And if you set that expectation, then when they inevitably make the mess, it's not like, but I told you not to do this. It's not excusing behavior. It's just expecting, like, I always work with moms and they're like, well, I have three kids under the age of 5 and my house is a mess. Well, good. It should be. Like, it would be weird if you looked great and your house looked great when you have three kids under the age of 5. Like, you're not superhuman. So tell your husband to actually help out instead of complaining about your house. But so little kids, when we get into elementary school, they're supposed to be impulsive, right? Like, I want a 7 and 12-year-old to be impulsive. I don't want your 35-year-old husband to be impulsive. Like, and they're supposed to lie. Like, because you
mm.
get an idea and you don't have a lot of impulse control, and then you go do it, and then mom or dad says, hey, who did that? And you lie and blame it on someone else. That's what they're supposed to do. It's not like Parents freak out. Well, it's an integrity issue. No, it's not. It's an impulse control issue because they wanted to do something fun and they knew it was wrong and they just didn't want to get in trouble for it. So, where that leads to is then instead of overreacting and having those long, awful lectures about the importance of integrity and tell it, right, instead, that child who gets up in the middle of the night to get food or sneak the iPad, instead of being horrified because they were deceitful and now we've ruined our trust. Like, I don't mean to mock us, but I do because we get so melodramatic. Instead, I talk to them like, okay, I get it. So you got up in the middle of the night because eating food late at night is fun. When you're an adult, you can do it whenever you want. Sneaking the iPad. So, what I'm curious about, I love Dr. Shafer. I love the phrase, I'm curious. So, I'm curious. What was it about that? Was it exciting to plan that? Because you know our bedtime routine, and you know I go to bed, but then I get up to pee one time, and you heard me do that. And after that, I fall asleep because you are such a strategic thinker and you are so good at critical thinking skills and you know patterns because you see patterns in life. And so you knew that you would be able to sneak down then. And also, was it fun? Was it exciting to plan how not to get caught? And what was that feeling like when you opened up, when you picked the lock and you got the food that we've stored away? I bet that felt amazing. And so you're not excusing it, but the child's like, exactly. And I was like, of course you would do that. Now, so here's where we get to the discipline, which means to teach, which is you did that because it met all these needs inside. Now, the downside for you is you lose your privileges, you get in trouble, you're going to lose your video games. So we don't want that. So, what else could we begin doing where you could use your critical thinking skills, that strategy, where you get your brain stimulated? You have a big heart, and our kids have big hearts just toward other people, not always to us or siblings. And you love money. A lot of our kids are born entrepreneurs. So,
Hmm.
I bet we could get those same needs met, starting a little side business, volunteering to help elderly people in our neighborhood. So now instead of, I can't believe that you would do that, it's like, of course you did that, but it's not going to end well for you. So now I'm giving them a different way to handle it, if that makes sense. And then, look, teenagers, I get the emails like, I can't believe that my teenage daughter has a bad attitude. And I'm like, why? Like, what, like, they're supposed, like, stop being shocked that kids misbehave. And instead, so then you won't take it personally. So I remember when my son, when he like, I used to react to him all the time, and he came at me with a bad attitude. And I was like, Case, you know what I've noticed? Every time you have that attitude, it's because you're anxious, you're frustrated, or you're hungry. So you can talk to me like that if you want. It just doesn't end well. So there's not a lot of drama in that, right? You're just speaking truth, which is, I know that you know talking to me in that tone, I know you know that's not right. And it's not going to work out well. But I'm going to grab some chips. If you want to grab the salsa, I'll meet you on the deck and I'll help you with whatever you're struggling with. And so now I've completely changed the whole dynamic of the situation. Instead of, young man, you need to think about the attitude you use with me. You can't. Instead of confronting and getting this thing, I helped them identify, hey, when you're a jerk in life, and this is how my son and I talk to each other because we're kind of naturally jerks. We're guys. When you're a jerk in life, it's usually when you're anxious because things are out of your control, you're frustrated or disappointed, or you're hungry. So now I've given my son tools to know for the rest of his life, if he's got attitude, look inside and see what's going on. And then I invited him to problem solve. And inevitably, what I heard was, Dad, at school, this is going on. And then the apology would come. Hey, Dad, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have used that tone. Right. But
Hmm.
you led them to a place of contrition versus forcing an apology. I need an apology right now, young man. And then all you're ever going to get is sorry. Right. And it's not even a sincere one. I can tell you we're laughing a lot with this because I know it's really hard with the strong willed kids. But if you can really embrace it, these kids are awesome and they're so freaking smart. They're smarter than we are, which is, and they're so insightful, and you will learn so much about yourself and your own triggers. And at one point in his teen years, I remember talking to Casey and saying, I'm grateful for you. Like, I would have never grown up with a human if I just would have had like compliant, easy kids. Like,
Mm.
I've become a different person because of who you are. And then he became a different person. It can be a really beautiful and very difficult thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my first child was essentially from, past the toddler years, because the toddler years are what they are, no matter the disposition of your child, right? They're learning, they're ego driven, they're trying to meet their needs, and if you're expecting them to act like a civilized human being, there's going to be a lot of disappointment and frustration on your end of things. But they tend to break you in, and you tend to figure that out. But when she grew out of those toddler years, she really always has been a very kind of naturally compliant child, to the degree where you actually want to teach her a little bit of, you know what? We need to stand up for who we are, and we don't reach externally for our cues. We need to learn who we are and stand by that. So you have a child with this disposition, and then you help support them through that, and then you get your second child, right? And I know so many families who've had this experience, and they have this very compliant, rule following firstborn, and then they have a second child. And that second child is very free spirited, and can be explosive and very reactive. And it triggers a lot of things. And as a family, learning to navigate that and adjust to that requires a lot of healing. And I think it's the child that you need, as you've alluded to, the growth that you need. You're going to see that reflected in your child's behavior and go on that journey with them. And it's so healing. And I love how you talk about on your podcast to look at the meltdowns, to look at the moments that we may feel, because I think we are culturally primed to think that arguments are disconnecting. They are what you have discussed as being opportunities for connection. They are reaching out to you. They're not pushing you away. They are desperately reaching out to you and learning how to navigate those exchanges that are very emotional, but there's a need there, and figuring out, how do I meet that need and focus on meeting that need and stay regulated myself. So I'm just so excited to share all of this information with parents. Do you have, I know you work on scripts and things with parents who are early on in this journey, and they are learning how to stay centered in who they are, working on their boundaries. Do you have a starting off place if a parent's been listening to your podcast and they say, I'm trying everything and nothing seems to be working? Is there an icebreaker that helps that parent have a bit more recognition of the dynamics going on between themselves and their family?
I think I think my first thing is usually to go with humility. Right,
Mm,
and to break that with, even with a child, just simply apologizing, right? Of like,
mm,
"Hey, I've just" and look, to me, an apology and praising a child are the exact same thing. It's simply an acknowledgement of the truth. "Hey, I've been to" this is what kinda helped me with our son is I would say, "Hey, Case, I need to apologize because when you do these things, I react all the time, and I want you to know that's not your issue. That was just my own anxiety." And
mm,
there's something very now, I don't do constant apologies. I don't want parents like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll try better." Because the best apology is actually just changing your behavior, right, over time.
yes.
Like a guy who tells his wife like 40 times, like, "I'm sorry, I'll stop." It doesn't matter, right? Like, but that apology, humility to me as a parent, and the strong-willed kids will humble you because you're look, we're all learning this for the first time. Like your toddler, your teenager is just figuring out how to navigate life with all these hormones. And we as parents are trying to figure out. I was conditioned for the first 35 years of my life to respond or react this way. So humility in the sense of, yeah, I'm just trying to figure this out. I There were so many times with our son, and I know this isn't directly related, but it just popped into my head. When Casey was a teenager, there was this time where we were having a standoff. And our
Mm.
kids, they're like little attorneys, cops, and judges all wrapped into one. They're really smart. And so he wanted to go do something with friends, and I was holding to a no. And he gave me like PowerPoint presentation, like 15 reasons he should. And at the end of it, I said, Casey, I just have one question. And this almost makes me cry, and I don't know why. Do you trust me? And inherent in that, do you trust that I have your best interests at heart? And that's making me choke up. It's so weird. That was like 15 years ago. And he put his head down and he walked away and he's like, I know, Dad. And there was something beautiful about that, in that I didn't have to prove my point. We had built their relationship up so that he knew, I know if you're saying no, it's not because of your control issues anymore. It's because you have my best interests at heart. And there was
Mm.
something really magical about that humility, because I could have pulled, I'm the authority figure. I pay for your car. I pay for your phone. I don't know if I answered your question the right way, but I like how I answered. I like it reminded me of something. I'm actually crying. I'm going to try text Casey after this
Mm.
and say, do you remember that moment? But I'd say humility, give yourself compassion, grace to know when you mess up. You're learning new patterns. Celebrate progress. Like the first time that you come in a room and you don't scream at your child, and even if you do it weird, like, hey, do you want to play with Legos? And you're like, that was a little bit weird, but they came and sat with you. It's like, man, you just turned a corner and did something really beautiful. So moms especially, be really kind. Moms are so conscientious. Like with
Mm.
men, I have to hammer them like, no, you're an idiot. Stop it. Right. But all I have to do with a mom is say, you know what? You talk too much. I know. I'll change. And so
Mm.
with moms a lot, I'm like, no, be a little bit more kind to yourself as you go through this process. And Dr. Shafer, one thing I love about what you do is you are helping people get to the root of these things, and you do it in such a compassionate way, like your smiling face. Like I just I told Dr. Shafer before, I said, I will watch your videos just to look at your happy, smiling, compassionate face. It's healing, right? It's a wonderful thing. So
Oh, thank you so much. And when I was listening to you recalling this experience with your son, the thought that I had was, you don't have to accept this in this moment. But what I hope is that you understand where my heart is, right? You don't have to agree with me in this moment, but I hope that you understand where it's coming from. And that is all any of us are looking for in our relationships. And I would venture to say that that's in part why we're so triggered when we have given our heart and souls and our time to our these little humans that we love so much, and we're trying to teach them things, and they explode and they say, I hate you, mommy, or I hate you, daddy, or they behave in ways that we're maybe fearful of because they were something we experienced as children. We think, oh no, the shame and blame, did I model this for them? Did I pass on this generational curse? Whatever it is for you that you're carrying, you get stuck in that moment and you're feeling like they misunderstood you as a parent, what your goal was and what you wanted for them. And you get stuck in that emotional response to, oh no, shame and blame. I've messed it all up. Look where we are now. But instead, just stepping back and saying, this is just a moment. This is a part of the normal human experience. It doesn't mean I messed it all up. And if I have a period of self reflection and I realize, maybe I am modeling responses that don't work, I get to in real time model for my children you know what? I'm sorry. I don't think I did that right. This is what I wanted to do, and this is what I did, and those don't add up. And so I would like a reset. And with my children, we actually do this. My children are quite young. And when the whole family is basically bopping around, existing around one another in a dysregulated state, but no one's hearing one another, one of the quickest ways to get us to a place of regulation is I just literally say, "Hey guys, do we want to do a reset?"
Hmm.
And it's an invitation to connect. And 99.9% of the time, they stop in their tracks. You can literally see the weight pour off of their shoulders. They relax, they smile. Sometimes a side smile, but there's always a smile. And they say, "Okay, I want to reset." And we all reset one another. We go and we just go boop to each other's noses, which might sound really silly. But it's this way that we physically impart kindness and love and understanding and empathy on one another. And they get it to do it to me too. And that's my way of of acknowledging clearly I'm a part of this problem right now, right? I'm a part of this problem. Let's all reset. And then what tends to happen is from that moment on, we're just back to baseline
Love
and
that.
we get to move forward. So I love how you are offering families, parents, and children through the parents' opportunities to learn ways to reset and show up today, tomorrow, however long it takes for us to learn these new habits, because it does take time to practice, as we all know, allowing them an out from ways that we've been trying to connect that have been disconnecting in the past so that we can connect more deeply moving forward and really be the parents that we want to be and model the behavior for our children so that they can take those tools from us.
That is awesome. I love that. We have a thing we call rewind and replay. So, like for little kids, it's like, hey, little kid walked in, grabbed his sister's toy, whatever. Instead of like, I can't believe you did that. It's like, hey, you want to do rewind, replay? They have to walk
Mm.
backwards out of the kitchen because that's fun for little kids and then replay. So, you're kind of doing practicing new behavior. But I do that for parents. Like, if you start lecturing, getting on your kid, and then you walk backwards out of the room yourself. Even if you have teenagers, they're going to look at you like you're weird, but they already think you're weird anyway. And then you
So-
walk back into the room and you say, and then instead of lecturing, you point out one thing they've done well. And so
Mm.
that I love the like touching the nose, like that physical part of it. And it does, doctor, isn't it cool if you simply in the midst of it say, hey, I just messed up. Let's do a reset. Like they want the reset too. Like they want, and now it's not like we need to have a big long lecture and family conversation about our behavior. Nobody wants that. Hey, let's all reset. It's like, yeah, I need to reset because I love that you do that. That's so cool.
You know, it works really well for our family. And I think trying to have those opportunities for connection, like you mentioned, doing blocks. We do a lot of blocks. I actually have a book that we discussed before the show came out, coming out in May of this year called The Boy and His Brightly Colored Blocks. And it's about a little boy with PDA tendencies who regulates himself through his blocks and is learning how to invite other people into his world and is learning how to deal with transitions and having to get away from his blocks. And his caregiver, which in this book is his mother, uses the blocks as a way not only to connect and stay in those safe spaces with him, but also uses the blocks as an opportunity to help him with the transitions, with the disappointments, because for him, that is a safe space to learn those lessons. And so I love how you, with the football that you mentioned, you know, my son likes tossing the ball with me. So let's go in this moment of dysregulation, let's go to the safe space. And so I think that's maybe something that listeners could do as they're identifying opportunities to connect and not correct their kids. What are the safe spaces that you can join one another in and then build from there? How can listeners learn more about you and the incredible work you're doing, listen to your podcast so that we can continue this conversation and learning opportunity after today's show.
Just look up the Calm Parenting Podcast and you'll find us everywhere. CelebrateCalm.com, but Calm Parenting Podcast. I love doing the podcast. We're on Instagram, and I'm actually a year ago, I swore I would never be on Instagram. And then I started doing the video because I don't like to be on video. But now it's a really cool community. It's at Calm Parenting Podcast. I post a video and I'm very, very active there, like answering people's questions. And it's become in social media kind of a really encouraging place where moms, dads can come and be like, oh, we're the most common is, oh, we're not alone. We're not the only one who has a kid. And then you find out, I think we have 900,000 people there now. And it's like, oh, we're not the only ones. So I love that aspect of letting parents know, like, no, you're definitely not alone.
That's beautiful, and at the end of the day, that's the thing that I love about the framework of your platform is it is coming from a place of encouragement and empowerment, and when we are in these tricky situations, that's exactly what we need to move forward and help have an out road from the fire rather than escalate the fire, escalate the tensions, and so I just applaud you for what you're doing. And I encourage all of our listeners to, if you're not already subscribed to the show, make sure that you subscribe to it. And you will take away so many incredible opportunities to not only connect with your kids, but also the trick is we're all kind of just big kids walking around. So we we can apply these principles if we find that we're having disconnection in our lives at work and our friendships. These principles apply there too. How can we work on how we connect with other people that we love and care about and need to connect with in our lives? How can we find ways to validate them and build rapport with them and move away from disconnection and correction? So many opportunities for development and growth through listening to your podcast and being a part of your community. And I'm so grateful that you were on the show today to share that with our listeners.
Dr. Shafer, I love what you do. You're an awesome human. I like
Oh,
collecting awesome humans around me, and you are one of them. So thank you.
thank you so much. And thank you so much for being on the show. I so appreciate you. And I hope that we can have you on the show again to touch back and give more advice because it's been incredible. Storytellers, please leave comments for the show. And if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you do subscribe so you don't miss any of the inspiring guest episodes and the Mastering Your Mindset short talks that we have coming up here on Talks with Dr. Shafer. Until next time, stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.